So, Terri Fiez, I mentioned she is the Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at CU Boulder. She's also the Chair of the Collaboratory Executive Board. Please give a warm welcome to Terri Fiez.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. As Maury said, Brian Wilson actually came up with the idea of, like, why don't we hold an ARPA-E workshop? And I think we thought it was a great idea. And if you look at the state of Colorado, we're third in the nation for ARPA-E awards, and we want to be number one. So that's part of why we would like to do this. We think that there's more and more capacity here, and we want to help support that. As Maury said, the Collaboratory is this partnership between the three academic institutions and NREL, and I think it's really unique in the nation the way we have worked together over the years. We've had state funding for about 7 years. That was about $8 million total that allowed us to make investments through matching on grants to really incent collaboration between the four institutions that are part of the Collaboratory. We're really working at what our next direction is going to be and how we can continue that effort. Also, over the last 7 or 8 years, there's been significant investments in the state of Colorado. If you look at the investment at Colorado State and the Powerhouse and many of the other things that they're doing related to energy, this building is an example on the CU campus of a major investment. Mines just opened a Coors Materials Research Center. And if you go down to NREL, if you compare it from 8 or 9 years ago, it's a different place. A very vibrant, active research entity. So we're very fortunate in the state of Colorado with the investments we've made. And what we really want to do is continue to build and grow on that. And so this workshop is one example of that. So we hope that you will take away today helpful hints. You'll make connections that will allow you to network to figure out who you might partner with in the future too. So next I'd like to introduce Alan Rudolph, our Vice President for Research at Colorado State University, and he's going to talk a little about, we have ARPA-E as an opportunity, but there are other funding opportunities that we'd also like to expose you to. So Alan will talk about that.
Actually, what they asked me to talk a little bit about was a history of the four letters ARPA, because ARPA-E was founded in 2009. It actually was modeled after an agency with a D in front of it called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which was founded in 1959. The president at that time, as you recall, and it was kind of well represented in the movie Hidden Figures, if you saw that movie. We had just experienced Sputnik, and the U.S. was essentially caught in technological surprise. And Eisenhower invested in an agency with 10% of the federal budget at the time. I don't know what that original budget was. But DARPA's coming up on its 60th birthday, actually. This summer it'll be celebrating 60 years, and there'll be a substantial event in Washington around those 60 years. ARPA-E was modeled after DARPA, and they asked me to say a little bit about DARPA because I spent 6 years as a program director at DARPA in 1997 to 2003 in the Defense Sciences Office. And ARPA-E was founded in 2009, and as I said, it came out of a number of reports, Gathering Storm, National Academy reports that basically said we needed a DARPA-like organization to go after the energy space in a major way. And ARPA-E was formed. In fact, some of the people out here in Colorado, like Jeff Moose, worked with Tony Tether, the director at DARPA at the time, to help formulate ARPA-E, which is now about the size of a DARPA office. But in talking about these four letters of Advanced Research Projects Agencies, it's kind of worthwhile to start with some understanding of the ethos of these agencies, because they're fundamentally different than DOE, NSF, NIH, the very foundations of the federal flow of funds into our higher ed institutions in Colorado. The way they are essentially different is they operate essentially without the same kind of study sections and processes that are present in many of the other federal agencies that administer federal funds. They are essentially organizations that bring people in their mid-career, as I did. I came out of the Naval Research Laboratory in 1997 after a decade of bench science. But they bring people from all walks of sectors, whether it's industry, academia, other government agencies. They come into these agencies like ARPA-E and DARPA. Now there's an IARPA. You may have heard of the Information Advanced Research Projects Agency. So they come in mid-career, like you'll hear from Brian Wilson, who left CSU as an associate professor. Were you associate professor at the time when you left? Full professor. Yeah, so mostly these are people with tenure or some stability and actually accomplishments in their career come to these ARPA agencies, and basically, as I did, I walked into the agency. Brian can describe his experience, and I'll tell you why I'm sort of taking you through this history. But in that interview, which was one of the most unusual interviews I have ever had in my career, I get basically asked, what would you do with $100 million to change the world? And in fact, if you go to the ARPAE website now, you'll see, I think their moniker is Changing the World. And so just like Eisenhower establishing the first DARPA in 1959, the mission of the agency at DARPA, and I imagine as you hear ARPA and IARPA, are essentially the same. And that's avoid technological surprise. And in essence, these were created with a national security interest, understanding that technological superiority has a strong national security interest as well. And so even as ARPAs have been proliferating outside of the D with defense, I think the creation of ARPA-E and IARPA are also with this sort of mindset that these are investments in national security as well as technological superiority for the good of the economic foundations of the country. The reason I took you through that little bit of history about how people come to DARPA or IARPA, how I came, how you'll hear Brian's story, is because fundamentally the thing that I try to tell our faculty up at CSU in dealing with DARPAs or IARPAs or ARPA-E, it's a personal relationship base. It's almost kind of like a venture capital organization where individuals who come to that organization and are asked that question, how would you change the world, are given significant license to create programs that are, of course, relevant to the mission of the day, but there is no prescription. There's no, when I came into DARPA, when Brian got to ARPA-E, you weren't handed a playbook that says, this is the program you'll run, this is how you'll run it. And so ARPA-E, like DARPA and IARPA, is a collection of programs run by a collection of people who are coming to these agencies as part of their career development. And that's really important to understand because at the very heart of the pursuit we'll be talking about most of the rest of the day, I'm sure we're going to be talking about ideas. And those ideas are important because, in fact, these agencies without that prescription are allowed to take risks that others can't. And in fact, at DARPA, we were often, Defense Sciences Office was the most basic research arm of DARPA. There are offices that serve the military users and higher technology readiness levels or higher applied science. But you're really given a license to take risk with, of course, the understanding that you're taking that risk in order to capture something of significant impact. What that also means is that you can propose ideas there that in study sections of most agencies or review processes of most agencies get filtered out because, as we know in our standard federal agency funding, we tend to be more incremental than reach. And so much like a venture capital organization, ARPA-E, DARPA, IARPA are looking for quicker returns of impact. They're willing to invest in things out over the horizon, but they want to see the reduction of that risk in the earliest phase. And I'm sure Brian and the people you'll hear who have received ARPA-E funding will talk about that. What it often means is you find yourself in an interactive mode with a program director that is not like getting funding from other agencies. These are people who are only in Washington for 4 or 5 years to make an impact of their own. And so they want to see quick returns because they're only there for 4 years. And so it's a relationship-based pursuit. So keep that in mind as we go through the day. yes, the idea has to hit that sweet spot, and they put out all kinds of BAAs and RFPs and RFIs. Sorry for the acronyms, but you know, they're constantly pinging the community for ideas and giving you a sense of the areas they're interested in. But it's a relationship-based approach. And so what we've done up at CSU more often than not is buy plane tickets for faculty, because it's very hard to sit and send a proposal into one of these ARPA agencies and just get funded without meeting the program directors and without interacting and developing a relationship with these program directors. So I think the fact that we're holding this workshop is really good, because ARPA-E now, as Terri said, Colorado's on their radar. There know some people here, people like Brian, who've gone to ARPA-E and spent time. The more we can do that, I actually think, in our university we talk about IPAs and think about that. But, oftentimes I've told people when I was at DARPA, the best way you can get DARPA funding is to start send people from the institution to go work there. So, that's another thing I'd throw out at you, is that, opportunities to go and spend time in an agency like ARPA-E or DARPA or IARPA are really enriching if that's something of interest to you. But they also, I think, contribute to this goal we're after today, as to how can we more effectively bring ARPA-E funding here. And if it's relationship-based, then developing these relationships by going to work there or by having people like Brian go work and come back really does establish the seeds of what we're trying to achieve here today. So that's a little bit of my experience from having served in one of these ARPA agencies, at least the one that set forth the path for the newest one. Although I think IARPA came after ARPA-E. They were talking at one time about putting an education ARPA together. That never, I was at DARPA, we were actually talking about that, never really happened. But there are still attempts to emulate this way of investing, and you'll hopefully get a greater appreciation of that over the course of the afternoon. And I think people like myself and Brian and others who have served in these agencies are here for you as a resource, not only today, but into the future, if there's any way we can help making introductions, helping you navigate the agencies. More than happy to do that. So thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity for you to learn. It's a great opportunity for us as administrators to learn how we can help you in these pursuits. But that's really our intent, and wish everybody a productive, good luck day. Thank you.